This is a reading from John chapter 21, verse 4 and on. Just after daybreak, Jesus stood on the beach, but the disciples did not know that it was Jesus. Jesus said to them, "Children, you have no fish, have you?" They answered him, "No." He said to them, "Cast your net to the right side of the boat, and you will find some." So they cast it. And now they were not able to haul it in because there were so many fish. That disciple whom Jesus loved said to Peter, "It is the Lord." So reading the Bible, especially, again, I'm Catholic, I pray the rosary nearly every day, praying the rosary, you realize that the message of Christianity, or like one of the practical things to do, is following God's will, right? Many of the mysteries of the rosary that I've reflected on, or that Catholics reflect on, Christians, the agony in the garden, the scourging at the pillar, especially the sorrowful mysteries, I guess, but even the Annunciation, Mary saying yes to God, we find this theme over and over and over again of following God's will, following not what you want to do, but where God is calling and asking you to do, even if that may be up Calvary, carrying your own cross, yada, yada. So it can be challenging to follow God's will, to give our lives over to Him, to abandon control. One thing that kind of struck me in a book, Searching for and Maintaining Peace, by, I think, Father Jack Phillips or something like that. I got the title right, though. He said abandonment isn't halfway. It's a yes or a no. And in committing your life to following God's will, you can't divvy it up into segments like, oh, I'll abandon my financials into God's hand. Like, God, please take care of that. Like my affair with my wife, like that's my side thing. I'm not going to give that up. Or my affair with another girl against my wife, I'm not giving that up to God's will. It's a yes or no. It's a definitive, or in order for it to be genuine, it needs to be definitive for all areas of our life. And that's freaking scary. I'm striving to do that now. I hope I'm doing a somewhat a good job at it. But especially in the past, like I look back, and even when I began trying to become more religious, more Christian, started reading the Bible, I definitely did that. I like divvied up parts of my life, and I was definitely afraid, and I didn't want to cede control to God. We like control. We like choosing our destination, and it can be difficult to abandon control of like the destination. Like, oh, like what do you want to do in 10 years? I have to say wherever God is calling. Again, it's good to have an idea, but to give control to God, like that's difficult. And upon reflecting this, because there's sort of this troubling notion, I guess, of like the world and those who aren't religious versus those who are religious, where we see, like simply put, people who don't follow God at all, by worldly standards, but almost especially by worldly standards, do really well. Like, I don't know, it would actually be interesting if there was a study of like the richest people of the world, like the top 111, or not 1% of, their faith, if they're faithful. Because in my mind, at least reflecting on it, I feel like the devil can trap people to not following God's will. They're following their own desires, their own hearts, their lust, their greed, whatever. And they can succeed at that pursuit, which is kind of ironic, and can be lulled into a false sense of security of, okay, like I'm just going to chase the bag, I'm just going to chase the money, and they get that. They get there, and they're kind of lulling themselves with that, but they're not realizing that was their own will. And in fact, they were going against where God might have been calling them. Now, even if we're not like that extreme, like I'm kind of painting that, like chasing money in a bad light, even if we are Christian, we're trying to walk with God, it's challenging. It's challenging to give up control. I remember, though, it's kind of striking. It was C.S. Lewis, I think The Great Divorce. It was something along the lines of, in heaven they say thy will be done, but in hell God says to the people, your will be done. He's saying, you do what you want. Like, follow your own will, not mine. You'll end up in hell. But it's challenging. Yeah, and that's looking at my notes here. It has to be something that we desire, because it's kind of our instinct to live for ourselves and end up following our will. To live for Christ, it has to be something else. It has to have some oomph to it, because it's challenging. Like Christ says that, take up your cross daily and follow me. And we see that throughout the stories of the Bible. Like, yes, there's blessings. Yes, there's, with the promise of eternal salvation, that doesn't mean it's not challenging. And again, so it's unnatural to follow our will. I think it's unnatural. Like, we're idol-making machines. Mike Schmitz, I think, has said something like that. And it can be difficult, very difficult, especially when we don't see the fruits of it playing out right away. So we have to be really convicted and really convinced that following God's will, where God's calling us, is the right thing for us. And I'm coming more and more in my faith to understand like how important the Bible is in this story. First off, this passage here I read at the start, again, this theme you can pick out all throughout the Bible, and I'm going to illuminate here just in this passage, but the theme real quick is of you don't follow God's will, things go poorly. You follow God's will, it multiplies your actions, or it brings blessings, grace, miracles when you're following God's will. When you don't follow God's will, things go bad. When you do, they go well. We see here some of the disciples. This is after Jesus was resurrected, but he hasn't appeared to these disciples. Actually, I believe he hasn't appeared to these disciples specifically. He might have appeared to the 12 already. I think he did, actually. These might have already seen him. Whatever, that's not. But anyway, this is after the resurrection. That's the point. And the disciples, they're going out fishing at night. They catch nothing. And then Jesus comes along at daybreak, on dawn, beautiful, on the beach. And it's after a long night of fishing, and they have caught nothing. And that's kind of like the time to fish. They're probably bringing their boat, and they're tired. They don't want to go back out there. And they tried. And they tried with their own will, with their own ideas. Nothing. Zero. Nada. Jesus says to them, you have no fish. They're like, nope. He says, try it again. And I could imagine the disciples being like, are you kidding? Like, we've been fishing all night, like at the best time to fish, right before dawn, and we caught nothing. You want us to cast our net out again? And they do it, and they bring in, like, they were not able to haul it in because there were so many fish. That's the verse. That's the beautiful verse. So, again, illuminating here this idea, following your own will, your own ambitions, no fish. Jesus says to put the net out, more fish than you could ever expect. So this is why the Bible, like this story, but more so the theme of the Bible in general, is so important. Because what we see in the Bible, like these examples, following God's will, not following God's will, but more importantly, we're granted insight into the heart of God, into Christ, into who this person that we're ceding control of our lives into. We're given insight to who we're sacrificing our will to, and that is so important to know. Because again, we have to kind of, it's difficult if you didn't know the Bible, and if you just kind of heard about Christianity, heard about Christ, heard about God, no Bible, no relationship, no silent mental prayer, whatever, meditative prayer, to offer your will over. Like, that's a big deal. That's a really big deal. And this is why it's so important to know God. To know God through, again, like I'm saying, the Bible, I'm realizing that this wonderful love story, but also to know God like on a personal like relationship basis. Solitude, not listening to music everywhere, not constantly watching YouTube videos or podcasts or trying to learn. Solitude, like meditative, reflective, mental prayer. Gabby Castillo has a great video on that. And yeah, this is kind of obvious now that I'm saying it, but I think it's helpful. Like, there needs to be, you need to know who you're following to give your life to them. And I guess technically you can like abandon it. Like, we may never know fully God until we see him face to face in heaven, like already but not yet, that type of vibe. But I would say, especially for my life, like being confident in surrendering to God, you need to know God. And the Bible helps us with that, and prayer helps us with that. I'm going to stop the video there. I kind of keep rambling about this, but I think I just kind of got the idea out. Yeah, to give our will, to sacrifice the direction of our life, to sacrifice everything, we need, and it's really helpful for us to help make that sacrifice, to understand Christ, to understand his love for us, to understand that, hey, this is probably the right direction. And then, again, beyond the Bible, our prayer, encountering Christ, encountering God through prayer, the Holy Spirit, having some experience of consolation and prayer, that definitely helps as well. Yeah, that's the video. I hope it helped. I'm actually really glad with this video. I feel like I got what I was trying to say out, which can be tough in some other videos. But yeah, this is just a wonderful reflection I had when I was praying this morning about this verse. And I invite you to pray. I may start doing some videos like giving like a prayer reflection from these verses too at the end. I invite you to pray of like what happens when you don't follow God's will. Think back to your life where I'm kind of imagining like Jesus on the beach after he says like, hey, like bring out your net, and they bring in all the fish. But before that, they got no fish because they were just kind of doing their own thing. It's not the Bible. It doesn't necessarily say in this verse that they weren't following God's will or whatnot, but they caught no fish. They're not directly heeding the word of Christ, and then they do, and good things come. But I kind of imagine myself on the beach asking Christ, like, Lord, when is it that I have not followed your will? When have I gone astray on my own will? And yeah, asking Christ to illuminate that in your own heart and your own life. That's the reflection today. I love you all. Thank you for the support. God loves you, and God bless.